The United Nations General Assembly. The United Nations General Assembly is underway, and the big focal point is on how Prime Minister Modi's remark at the SCO summit in Samarkand last Friday is being lauded. While addressing the UNGA, French President Emmanuel Macron told world leaders that Prime Minister Modi was right when he told Russia's President Vladimir Putin that this is not the era of war. United States National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has also welcomed PM Modi's statement, adding that Russia needs to abide by the UN Charter. Remember, Prime Minister Modi had spoken to Putin several times over the phone regarding the war and has underlined the importance of democracy, diplomacy and dialogue. India continues to call for an immediate cessation of violence.
Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, was right when he said, the time is not for war. It is not for revenge against the West or for opposing the West against the East. It is the time for a collective time for our sovereign equal states to cope together with challenges we face. This is why there's an urgent need to develop a new contract between the North and the South, an effective contract which is respectful for food, for biodiversity, for education. It's no longer a time for bloc.
Now, my colleague Abhishek Jha lies me. He tracks the MEA closely. Very good morning to you, Abhishek. The fact that Modi took such a categorical stand in what is being seen as a public accusation almost towards Putin, this is being noticed by world leaders, the latest being Emmanuel Macron. But how big a setback is this for Russia? And also the fact that India has been accused of going soft on Russia, on continuing trade deals. Will this take some pressure off us, this statement?
Of course, see, initially the Western bloc led by USA, they tried to kind of influence, bully, force India to get away from Russia and be part of the Western ally and their whole narrative that whatever they are into with in this Russia-Ukraine conflict. However, India tried to maintain a stance of neutrality, which gradually the world has accepted, acknowledged and understood. And now when in the recent days when Prime Minister Modi had a meeting with President Putin, where President Putin also expressed his fatigue, and he said that he wanted everything that in the context of this Russia-Ukraine conflict to end very soon, but the other side is not willing to come on the dialogue table. In that context, Prime Minister Modi said to Putin that since Russia is a bigger Russia, he has to initiate some dialogue. Russia has to come first, and then probably this negotiation will happen. And he also said that this is not the time of war, and this is the same sentiment that the world has now picked up from there, and they are trying to reiterate it at multiple platforms. When in United Nations General Assembly, French President was addressing the whole issue of Russia-Ukraine conflict, not only in the sense of just two sides warring, but also the aftermath that it has created around the globe in multiple ways, the food crisis, economic crisis.
Abhishek, you're absolutely right. You know, be it France or the US, they welcome PM Modi's statement. Let's listen into what NSA Jake Sullivan had to say about it.
I think what Prime Minister Modi said, a statement of principle on behalf of what he believes is right and just, was very much welcomed by the United States and for the Indian leadership, which has long-standing relationships in Moscow from the very top all the way through the Russian government, to continue to reinforce that message that now is the time for war to end. And the way this war should end is for Russia to abide by the basic terms of the UN Charter and to return the territories that it has seized by force.
Well, Abhishek, we just listened in to Jake Sullivan. So definitely the United States and France look at PM Modi's statement as a shot in the arm to counterbalance Russia's invasion.
Of course, Shilpa, initially when we saw the West trying to bring India into their own fold on the issue of Russia-Ukraine conflict, but gradually they understood the fact that India and Russia have had a long-standing relationship. And now when Prime Minister Modi has maintained his neutral stance on the issue of this conflict, and he has also said to Mr. Putin that this is not time of war, there is a hope in the West that probably India would be able to bring in some sense into those and probably not to accept their narrative, to accept that the war is not a solution, and he's continuing his conflict, which has entered into 7 months. So probably India, they are hoping that probably India would be able to influence or guide or make some intervention where this whole conflict, which has now been into 7 months, and now the winter is coming, the crisis that Europe is facing in terms of energy and economic has in fact started giving the government backlash domestically from the population, very population of those countries.
Abhishek,
So in that context,
stay with us, because we're also joined by experts Patikrit Pen and Sushant Sareen, going across to Patikrit Pen. First, very good morning to you, Patikrit. How do you view PM Modi's statement in the first of what is being seen as a public statement, the strongest stand India has taken against Russia so far?
Well, first of all, I think there is a message both for Russia, and there's a tacit message for the West also. I think Prime Minister Modi has been right in terms of what he stated to the Russians, and that is exactly the stand that he has always taken. He had maintained a certain stated level of neutrality, did not take a stand against Russia, but I think he has made it a point, if not in as many words, that it's time to end the war. At the same time, I think the approach of Prime Minister Modi is far better than that approach of the West, which has always believed in sanctions and painting Russia as a devil, instead of actually engaging and understanding the concerns of Russia. In that way, I think the approach of Prime Minister Modi and India as a whole has been far more mature in terms of engaging with Russia. And when the time came, I think Prime Minister Modi, on behalf of Government of India, made it very clear that fine, whatever might be the reason for the war, it's time that you end the war. But finally, it is important to understand the leverage of ending the war today is with Russia. And that is where I think the West has actually succumbed. And this is something which I think India has also practiced and not just preached. Because in terms of Balakot airstrike also, I think Indian government at that time also made it very clear that we are only targeting non-military targets, and there is no objective of escalating the situation apart from, neutralizing certain terror hotspots or terror training camps. So it's not just by preaching, but by practice also India has demonstrated that this is not essentially a time for continuation of war of any kind. And I think mutual progress and understanding each other's concerns is far more important. And if you see, Prime Minister Modi's statement has been taken in a positive connotation by the President of Russia as well. And I think if the war ends, it's good for everybody, because there is a huge inflation in realm of food security. Food, wheat is there. They are a big supplier of wheat, whether it's oil. I think if you look at the global inflation, if the only country which can stop it right now is Russia by ending the war. And it's a lesson for the West also. The sanctions all the time on anybody they don't like does not help, and it does not even help in ending wars as well. I think the approach of India is perhaps the next big thing, or at least much more nuanced and much more, something which works in this era, where in a multipolar world.
Absolutely. And staying on the point that you made, Patikrit, the fact that the war is having a domino effect across the world, especially when it comes to inflation. Going